Okay, so today I'm going to do something that I haven't quite done before. So I have just finished reading this book, even though I have a bookmark in there that suggests otherwise. I promise you I have finished this. Um, excuse me. And today I'm not only going to be talking about this book, but this book is the completion of the original Mistborn trilogy. Oh, yeah, this is the Hero of Ages, by the way, in case you're wondering, even though you probably could tell it by the title. So I'm going to talk about this book, its predecessor, The Well of Ascension, and its predecessor, The Final Empire. Even though this is Mistborn, it's actually called The Final Empire. I'm going to talk about all three of these books because with the way that Brandon Sanderson has written this series, this is the end of these three books. Once you get through them, that is the end of the original Mistborn trilogy. Mistborn does continue on. Now, I've done some very... I did some research, but I had to be very smart with my research. I don't want to have any spoilers given to me, but I managed to do some research to determine what the deal is with book number 4, and so in as far as comparing it to the original trilogy. And I found the answer that I wanted. Mistborn number 4 takes place 381 years in the future. So it's still within the same universe, but it is a separate trilogy, although it is still continuing on in that timeline. It's just continuing on 381 years in the future, which makes this the original trilogy, and so we are going to talk about this today. Even though I finished this book today, I'm going to talk about all of them at once. So, let's get right into it. This is my Mistborn chat. I'm going to move the books over there and get a little bit more comfortable because I have a lot of things to say. Now, the thing that I'm also going to be doing that's different today, not only am I talking about 3 books, but I'm also going to be jumping in and talking spoilers. So, I know that with all of my reviews, I do spoiler-free and spoiler versions. I'm not doing spoiler-free in this one because I just want to get into the nitty-gritty and discuss what actually happened. So if you have not read The Hero of Ages, or if you've not read any Mistborn and you don't want to be spoiled, this is the one time I'm going to say I don't recommend you watch this till you've read it and then come back and watch this. But if you have read them, I'm sure you're as excited as I am to get right into this and just discuss everything. So I want to start off by talking about the very first book, because this book, which this is the cover for the version that I read, I ended up going with the white cover version for the final book, but for the first 2, I went with these covers. The very first book in the original Mistborn trilogy, known as The Final Empire, I had to think about that there. The Final Empire changed my reading life. I came into January 2020 with my BookTube channel, and had you asked me when I first started my channel, what is the best series ever written, I would without a doubt have told you Harry Potter. J.K. Rowling is an amazing writer, and I would have gone on for hours telling you why Harry Potter is the single best series ever written. That was until I read this book. The Final Empire changed my life. It changed reading for me. It was an emotional experience and is by far and away, it was, when I read this book, it was by far and away the single best book that I had ever read. And that is saying a lot, because while I'm considering myself to be more read now than I was at the beginning of this year, because I've read a lot more this year than I normally do, I consider myself to be relatively well read prior to picking up this book, so it does say a lot that this is the best book. Well, after reading this book became the single best book that I'd ever read. Brandon Sanderson is immensely talented, and you can tell that he puts so much work into his creation of his world and his magic systems and his characters, that when it comes to him actually writing the books, they feel so full. It is, oh my god, it's an amazing series. So let's get into my thoughts on this first book. I came into reading this book. I started off reading the first couple of pages and I was struggling with reading it. And it's interesting because at the time I struggled reading it because of the writing style, but now I kind of look back on old Mr. Francy doing that video, past Mr. Francy of the past, saying, you think this is a tough writing style? Yeah, clearly it was when you were first starting BookTube, because I've read much more complicated writing styles than Brandon Sanderson since, and by comparison, Brandon Sanderson has a very simplistic writing style. But anyway, I did turn to the audiobook. I listened to the graphic audio version of the audiobook, which is amazing, and so a big shout out to them. They do a wonderful job. So, reading this book, I fell in love extremely quickly with not the main character, but who I consider to be the second main character, Kelsier. Kelsier is just, he's such an amazing character. He is in this world that, where the villain has won, and he's trying to change that. He wants to make everyone's lives better, and he's just such a great guy and filled with so much charisma. Of course, he then rescues Vin and tries to help her, and I grew to love Vin over the long haul of the book, but I fell in love with Kelsier almost instantly. Therefore, when Kelsier died in book one, I had the most massive reaction that I have ever had reading a book. I was so upset, and I could have reenacted the film Misery, of course inspired by the Stephen King novel Misery, where I play the role of the lady who wants to chop off the author's feet because how dare you kill my Kelsier? But one thing that I did really appreciate is that Kelsier may be gone, but he is certainly not forgotten for the remainder of the series. He is mentioned all throughout the first... he's obviously in the first book, but he's mentioned throughout book 2 and he's mentioned throughout book 3. So he's definitely not forgotten, and I do appreciate that. At least that's some kind of a consolation. I appreciated the action scenes in this first book, and I'm trying to remember a lot of it, but I certainly do remember when Vin took on Rashek at Credit Shore and defeated him, and I really did love that scene. I also loved Vin having to go to balls and her time that she spent with, I think it was CZ. God, it was months ago and I read this, not that long ago, but I'm finding it hard to try and distinguish each book. But anyway, when she went to the balls as Lady Valette, and I just, really appreciate that. And then, of course, she met Elend for the very first time, and who knew how big a role he was going to play for the rest of the original trilogy. And I'm now recalling Elend sitting there with all his books at the ball, and because I just keep thinking, gosh, that would so be me too. I would have all my books and just be sitting there reading them. But anyway, and it was just amazing. I loved the magic system of this book, and it's one of the things that really engrossed me into the book, is that the magic is at the forefront. Allomancy as well as Ferrochemy really shines brightly in this entire series, not just this book, but certainly in this book, magic's at the forefront of it all. Where there are other fantasy books that I've read that have next to no magic, or they have magic but they kind of just push it to the side. This all revolves around allomancy and ferrochemy, so, I really, really loved this book, and so just to stay on topic, sorry, when Kelsier died, I was really angry. I remember I was on break from work, sitting on a bench. We have a bench right near my work. It's maybe takes about a minute, literally, to walk there. I was sitting on the bench reading the part where Kelsier died, and oh my god, I had to go back into work and try and restrain myself from yelling at everyone, because don't get in my way, Mr. Francy was seeing red, like, seriously. But then when I read the conclusion of this book and understood why Kelsey had to die, I appreciated it. One of the things I said in my review for The Final Empire is that if Brandon Sanderson had come up with some really weak excuse as to why Kelsey had to die post the book, I would not have appreciated that, and I would have seen this book in a very different light. The fact that Kelsey's death is explained by Kelsey in a letter in the actual story allowed me to at least read the letter to see what he wrote, and then when I read what he wrote, I still wasn't happy, but logically I got why it had to happen. And also, of course, with that, forced the growth of Vin. So, of course, this book got 5 stars. It was just incredible. One of the single best pieces of work that I've ever read. So I read this book in February. In March, I of course went on to The Well of Ascension. I had come off such a high having finished The Final Empire, and I remember waiting for the 1st of March, waiting for it to the clock to strike midnight, because I knew the moment that it did, I was going to start reading this book right away, because I promised myself I would not pick it up till March, and I thought, I don't care if I have to go to bed or whatever, like even at 12:05, I'm going to pick up this book and at least read the first sentence, if not the first page. Like, I was just really excited about it. So I started reading the book and was really happy to be back in this world again. And I say this same thing with my Goodreads updates that I do. I was saying the same thing with Hero of Ages as well when I started the first chapter. I'm always happy to be in this world. It's just an amazing world with really wonderful characters. So it was great to be back with Vin again, and it was very interesting, this book, because while this book sees Vin as a Scar character, as a Scar character and a thief, and making her way up to finally find a way to trust Kelsey because of everything she's gone through with her family, and she has trust issues and PTSD and all of that kind of stuff, to eventually at the conclusion of the first book, killing Rashek and becoming a much stronger person for it. It was great seeing her at the beginning of Well of Ascension being the king's wife, King Elend taking the throne, and her being his wife, and everyone kind of living in a comfortable situation. At the very least, it was comfortable. Just a moment. Okay, they were in a very comfortable situation, and it was just nice to see this. And Vin obviously being Kelsey's Mistborn, and basically just protecting him, sitting out on the roof each night and patrolling everywhere, making sure nothing's gonna harm Ellen. I'm being reminded of the nanny. Nothing's gonna harm you, not while I'm around. But anyway, because that was very much Vin. Nothing's gonna harm Ellen, not while I'm around. Yeah, and I appreciated that. I, of course, in this book got to know Orosor, who turned out to be Tensoon. And when I was reviewing this book, I said, I'm not going to call him Tensoon, I'm going to call him Orosor. After reading book 3, I feel extremely bad, excuse me, for saying, I'm just going to call him Orosor. No, his name is Tensoon, and that's what we're calling him. So, meeting Tensoon under the guise of being Orosor and learning more about the Kandra, and I just, loved that. Another character to be introduced to and to learn more about them. Obviously, we learned very little bit about Kandra in this book, where Tensoon played the role of Lord Renault, I believe it was. But yeah, in this book we got to learn obviously more about him. Excuse me, and I grew a very, very soft spot for him. Him? Yes, him. There are its in book 3, so I'm trying to determine. It is a him. Yes, Tensoon is a him. Okay, moving on. So, one of the characters that I absolutely loved and I felt was very necessary for book number 2 was that of Tindwyl, and I missed Tindwyl in book 3. I thought I would miss Calcia in book 2, but you can't. There's no time to miss Calcia. Like, I did miss him. There is time, but because of the religion, the religion of the survivor, he is everywhere. He's nowhere and everywhere all at the same time. So that was good. But back to I'm really going here, there, and everywhere with this. But as you can tell, lots of feelings. I really felt the character of Tindwall was necessary for this series. She just brought something different, and she really assisted Elend to become the king that he should be, and she provided some love for Sazed, which was beautiful, which made it really tough to lose her in the end. Other than that, though, it was just a lot of politicking, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. Having read all 3 books now, I can appreciate book 2 now more than I did when I first read it. Yes, there are ups and downs along the way. Yes, it is slower paced, but I appreciated getting to see the political side of things in book 2, considering how very action-packed book 1 and book 3 are. So I'm so sorry. So upon reflection, I do it. Even though I gave this book 5 stars anyway, I'm appreciating it even more now. The moments towards the end at the actual well, there was a plot convenience, and I'm recalling the mist pointing to this thing that allowed Ellen to come back alive, and I didn't appreciate that. I also felt that, Vin made some bad decisions. She should have just recreated the world once she had the power of the Well of Ascension, but had she done that, we wouldn't have had this book, The Hero of Ages. Tindwall's death was sad, but I don't feel that this book had as many consequences as this book. In this book, we lose Calcia, and that was extremely tough for me to go through. In this book, the toughest death for me was Tindwall, and as tough as that was, she was just a character that came into this book. She wasn't from book 1, so while it disappointed me, it was more disappointing for me for Sazed, and I felt bad for Sazed than for me personally. And so I felt that when Sazed was fighting Marsh towards the end of this book, if Sazed had died, that would have had a massive impact on me. But the fact that he came close to death, like I think 3 times in that fight, and he still survived, I went from, oh my god, Sazed's going to die, to, by the time he survived, oh, okay, this is just getting a bit, I don't want to say lame, but it's getting a bit, I don't know. I'm becoming more neutral to this now, and if he dies, he dies. If he doesn't, he doesn't. Because there were just moments where he's going to die. No, he's not. He's going to die. No, he's not. He's going to die. No, he's not. Okay, can we just decide if he's going to die or not? Like, anyway. Elend becoming Mistborn, I think, is one of the best things that could have happened. And of course, this does lead us on to this book that I just finished today, the 3rd book in the original Mistborn series, Mistborn, the Hero of Ages. Now, as you can see, and I did mention this earlier, I started off reading these 2 covers and then ended up going with this one. What happened was, Mistborn is a series that was recommended to me and all of the subscribers of a booktuber that I follow, who I have not mentioned her yet, but I am going to be mentioning her sooner than you think. I have a plan of when it's going to happen. It's going to be very soon. But anyway, this particular booktuber kept gushing about Mistborn, saying it is the single best thing since sliced bread, and I thought, well, if she loves it that much, I might as well give it a go, and at the very least I can tell her what I think of it, and we'll see how we go. And then I just fell in love with it of my own accord, so I appreciated her saying that to me. I found on the website that I purchased the books from a collection of the first 3 books. They came together in a sleeve, and I actually have a video of me showing you guys the 3, and this was, gosh, was this in January? I think it was in January. Wow, a long time ago. Yeah, so I had these 3 books, but see, the problem is the length. So going across the cover. The length is really short, and so it makes it hard to open the book to read, where because, as you can see here, the length of the white book is longer, it makes it much easier to open this book. It's much more floppy, so it makes it much easier to open the book. So I don't have any of the other two books in the white cover versions. However, if I continue on with the series, which we'll talk about in a moment, if I continue on with the series, I'm going to be buying the white cover series from now on. Okay, so on to The Hero of Ages. I loved this book. And it will receive 5 stars from me because each and every one of the books in this series deserves 5 stars. It is the single best series that I've ever read. I just feel that comparatively to the other two, that this book was a little bit of a letdown. Again, I can't state enough how much this book does deserve 5 stars. It absolutely does. It's just that dealing with this villain that we know nothing about, that the only way we can keep secrets from it is to think things in our mind but not be able to discuss them. It is wonderful in theory, but I just don't think it paid off in execution. The entire book, wonderful. But Ruin as a villain that we're trying to fight against, that we know next to nothing about, who keeps changing everything, made it really annoying to read, which again brings out an emotion in me. There are books that I've read this year that do not provoke any real emotion, and I finish them and go, oh, that was nice, or have a neutral reaction to it. Every single book here has had some reaction out of me. They've all been emotional to read, and that was annoyance for me with this one, with Ruin and dealing with Ruin all the way through. I also didn't like the fact that the different members of the I just finished reading this. What's the word? The group, the team, the whatever you want to call it, Kelsey's group. They all split up and went their different ways, and so Spook kind of goes one way, and then Sayzed and Breeze go another way, and Ellen goes another way, and everyone's just going here, there, and everywhere. And excuse me, it just made it really hard to kind of keep up with everyone, because just as you're really getting into the whole, into the midst of grasping what's going on with one group, there's a new chapter and we're going over to a completely different group who's in a completely different area. I started confusing oh gosh, I can't even remember his name anymore. This is embarrassing. The two rulers. Oh my gosh. Okay, so the king or the ruler, or whatever you call him, the guy that captures Vin, and the guy that Spook is dealing with. I started confusing them and thinking, oh, okay, yeah, because he's got Vin captured. Oh, wait, no, he's the other one. Oh, okay, he's the one that has the daughter that Spook, like, no, wait, no, that's the other one. And that just really confused me, because I found that they, to me, felt very similar as rulers and as people. So that kind of annoyed me. But I'm going to talk a bit about Sayzed, and then I'm just going to jump to the end, because while this book had confusing times, it had, had a few lulls here and there, and it just became annoying with Ruin changing everything. The end of the book is what makes it so worthwhile. It was a wonderful ending. So let's talk about Sayzed. The fact that Sayzed kind of lost his ability to believe in things and have faith, and considering that his whole life was lived around recording religion, and that he had faith, and it's very important to know that he had faith in these two books. He did. But then, of course, when Tindwall, I almost said Twindwall there, when Tyndall dies at the end of the Well of Ascension, obviously it greatly affects him, and then he starts realizing there's no God and no religion makes sense and all this kind of stuff. That did annoy me quite a lot, because Sazed to me was always such a dependable character to go to when you're just feeling down and you want to talk to someone who's really nice and who's going to make you feel so much better. And so to have a depressed Sazed, while it makes sense, really annoyed me, because I found myself thinking, who would I go to if I wanted someone to raise my spirits? There's no one. Where in these two books, who would I go to if I wanted someone to raise my spirits? I go to Sazed. Straight away I will go to Sazed, but not in this one. Sorry. Not in this one. Anyway, so to cut a long story short, obviously he does find belief again towards the end, and thank goodness, considering what happened. Now let's talk about Tensoon and how wonderful he was to be able to rescue Sazed, and, well, first of all, to meet up with Sazed, and then Sazed obviously goes and talks to the Conjurer. What a wonderful moment to see Sazed getting to speak to the Firsts and learn all about the religion and the first contract and all that kind of stuff. And then, so I just love that. The second, that Conjurer second, whatever his name is, the one that was like, we're just going to arrest all of you and throw you into a hole. I don't like him. He needs to know his place. He is a second, not a first. But anyway, that annoyed me a lot. But when Sazed made the discovery that the ATM... Whoa! The ATM is beneath the floorboards of the freaking Conjurer place. Seriously, I never would have guessed this. It was such a good idea, and it turns out, massive moment, and I'm just being reminded of it now, or just remembering it now, Rashek wasn't a bad individual. Rashek was being controlled by Ruin. It makes me see Rashek in such a different light, because in this book you can't help but hate Rashek, and when Vin kills him, you're like, yay! And then when he says, you have no idea what you've done, I am your god, you're thinking, yeah, well, screw you. Dude, you're dead. Stop playing the part. You know what I mean? In this book, oh my god, it's like, oh my god, Rashek was actually a good guy. He was just being controlled. And he just didn't know what he was doing when he had the powers from the Well of Ascension. And oh my god, the poor guy. But anyway. So now, obviously, so they find the ATM, and yeah, that really, whoa, never expected that. Then Vin getting the power of preservation and becoming a god, and all of her time from the moment that she gets the powers from preservation, she becomes a god, and she's talking with Ruin. I loved that. That was so good. The one thing I didn't like, as a fan of this series, as a writer, I get that there needs to be consequences, and I get what Brandon Sanderson is doing, but just as a lover of the series, one thing I didn't like is that Vin couldn't come back down to Earth and talk to everyone and say, guess what, I have preservation's powers, because I think that would have been amazing. Or just have a final moment with Elend on Earth would have been amazing, but Nasa, not gonna happen. I loved it. I loved their discussions. I loved how the point of balance just kept getting proven over and over again. I love that Elend then went and fought all the Kolas, and the idea. I mean, for all the times I was thinking, there are things about this book I don't like, the ending was just so good. The idea that they had, that Elend had, the idea that Elend had, being that everyone swallows all the ATM and uses it all up in the fight against the Koloss, not in order to defeat them. They knew they were going to die, but to ensure that they use all of the ATM so that there's none left for ruin. What a great idea! Oh my god, what a great idea. Okay, just a moment. And it's just such a wonderful idea of Sanderson's once again, and it just made me really happy to know that it made me happy to know that there was a greater reason to use the ATM other than just to survive. It shows that Brandon Sanderson is not thinking 1 or 2 steps ahead. He's always thinking 10, 20, 50, 100 steps ahead. And I think that's one of the things that most excites me about this series, is that I'm thinking 1 or 2 steps ahead. There are Koloss coming, we have to defeat them. Sure, yes, we should swallow the ATM so that we can defeat the Koloss. No, sir. We should swallow the ATM so there's none left for Ruin. And Ruin can't get the ATM anymore. So good. And then, of course, the final moment, and I think the actual hero of ages. So deserved. I loved Kelsia and still do to this day, and I would just love to read. Who here doesn't want to read a book, like a prequel to the Final Empire, where we get to see where Kelsia went from just everyday living to when he was in the pits of Hathsin and going through all that stuff to when he gets out of the pits of Hathsin. I want to read me a Kelsia book. Okay. But in saying that, I obviously grew to love Vin over the series. I grew to absolutely love Elend over the series. But Sazed was just my special little guy. And the fact that Sazed got to be the hero of ages, or well, always was meant to be, but it's revealed at the end that he's the hero of ages, was just so amazing. And I was so very happy for him. And the fact that he was able to change the world back to the way that it should be and use everything that he learned about all the religions and make make the world the best place that he could was just so wonderful. And then the fact that he left all of his books to Spook was just so incredible as well, because I love Spook and I'm so glad he survived. I don't know how Breeze survived. I love Breeze from day one, but Breeze is still alive. How did this work out by the forgotten gods, to use Caesar's words? Breeze survived. But anyway, my camera is going to cut out at about the 33-minute mark. So just quickly, this was my wrap-up of Mistborn, the original series, the Final Empire Book 1, the Well of Ascension Book 2, and the Hero of Ages Book 3, the single best series I have ever read. So to answer your question, will I continue on with the Alloy of Law? Absolutely I will be. It will be on my May TBR. The white cover's already purchased. You'll see it there soon. I post videos every Monday, Thursday, and Sunday. I'll see you again soon. Peace, blessings, and so much love. Mwah. Happy reading. Bye, guys. Let me know what you think of this series below. Bye.